All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today we are diving straight into a massive, fundamental question. Who actually holds the power in government? And, how exactly do we keep them accountable? If you've ever wondered how the gears of national administration turn behind closed doors, or who is genuinely pulling the levers of the state machinery, you are absolutely in the right place. We're going to look way beyond the surface level of elections and really dig into the fascinating and honestly sometimes precarious reality of the executive branch. So let's jump right in. To really wrap our heads around the complexities of a national government, it actually helps to start super small. Think about your school, your university, or maybe your workplace. Who is actually in charge? In literally any organized setting, there is always a specific group making the big, sweeping policy choices. But here's the thing. A decision means absolutely nothing without action, right? So, there is always a separate, dedicated group making sure those choices are actually executed and enforced on a day-to-day basis. That division of labor, that's the absolute bedrock of administration. And this exact concept of administration scales all the way up to the national level, forming what we call the executive branch. The executive is, well, it's essentially the management team for the entire country. They're the body at the very top taking major policy decisions and supervising the routine administrative machinery that literally keeps society functioning. Because while the legislature might write the laws, it's the executive that breathes life into them. They carry this massive responsibility of implementation, enforcement, and everyday governance. Okay, here is our quick roadmap for today. 1. Defining the executive branch. 2. Discretionary powers of the president. 3. Prime Minister and cabinet. 4. Executives at the state level. And finally, 5. The permanent administrative machinery. Section 1. Defining the executive branch. So before we get too deep into the weeds, here are the core objectives we need to tackle today. We're going to distinguish between parliamentary and presidential systems to see exactly how power is distributed. We'll look at the president's unique constitutional position, unpack the true weight of the prime minister's role alongside the council of ministers, and then map out that vast administrative machinery operating underneath it all. Getting these 4 pillars down is completely crucial to decoding how modern governments actually run. While a lot of countries share similar titles for their leaders, their actual powers can differ wildly depending on the underlying system. Take monarchs, for instance. The Queen of England acts mostly as a ceremonial figurehead in a parliamentary democracy, bound by the advice of elected ministers. But then, conversely, the King of Bhutan wields significant active executive control over government affairs. And this exact same dynamic applies to prime ministers. The role operates entirely differently in India's parliamentary structure, where the PM is the undisputed head of government, compared to, say, France's semi-presidential setup, where a prime minister manages the day-to-day but often defers to a highly powerful president. Moving right along to Section 2, Discretionary Powers of the President. Back during the Constituent Assembly debates, Jawaharlal Nehru posed a really fascinating question. He asked, do textbook writers give me power to ask questions I wish to ask, or am I asking questions they have in their mind? This hits at the absolute heart of the president's role. There's this persistent debate, right? Is the president just a rubber stamp for the government, or is there a hidden layer of leverage? Assuming the president has zero discretionary power is a massive misconception. While they do act on the advice of the Council of Ministers, there are crucial moments, think fractured election results or major constitutional crises, where the president's personal judgment literally shapes the destiny of the nation. And one of the most critical tools at the president's disposal is the right to be informed. The prime minister is constitutionally obligated to share all information regarding the Council of Ministers' decisions. And let's be clear, this isn't just a polite tradition, it is a binding duty. Even if the president ultimately has to act on the advice of their ministers, this right guarantees they are never kept in the dark. It gives the president immense informal influence to caution, advise, or privately push back against government policies behind closed doors, acting as a really vital constitutional check. Okay, Section 3, Prime Minister and Cabinet. In a parliamentary system, there is this concept called collective responsibility, and it makes the prime minister's job incredibly precarious. A politician might joke, "My troubles are not over. I won the confidence vote." And honestly, it's so true. Because the entire ministry is basically an executive committee of the parliament, and they sink or swim together. A no-confidence vote against even one single minister is treated as a vote against the entire government, forcing the resignation of the whole council. It is a crazy high-stakes balancing act where internal unity isn't just about good teamwork, it's a matter of absolute political survival. Every decision has to be defended collectively, or the entire house of cards just comes crashing down. But as we know, constitutional theory often collides dramatically with political reality. When a prime minister has a single-party majority in the legislature, their position is practically unassailable. They have immense legislative leverage to just dictate policy and pass sweeping reforms with ease. But throw them into a coalition government, that solid foundation turns into shifting sands pretty quickly. The prime minister's power becomes highly volatile, forcing them to basically operate as a constant negotiator. Those sweeping changes are often shelved in favor of making concessions just to keep allied parties happy and prevent the government from completely collapsing. Zooming in a bit for Section 4, executives at the state level. So while state governments pretty closely mirror the central parliamentary model, there is a super fascinating twist in the power dynamic. The chief minister leads the majority party and directs policy, functioning almost exactly like a prime minister. But the governor, who is the nominal head of the state, actually holds more explicit discretionary power than the president does at the national level. Because the governor is appointed by the central government, they act as a vital, and sometimes, let's face it, highly controversial, bridge between the state and the center. This gives them unique structural leeway to do things like reserve bills or even recommend imposing central rule. Finally, Section 5, the permanent administrative machinery. You know, politicians come and go with the election cycles, but the civil service, that is the permanent machinery that actually keeps the country running. These are the career executives selected by specialized bodies, and they are tasked with faithfully implementing policy absolutely regardless of who wins the election. The machinery itself is intricately layered. Right at the top, you've got all India services like the IAS and IPS, whose officers manage massive districts and oversee crucial law and order. Then, central services like the Foreign Service handle national and international interests. And finally, state services handle the granular, everyday local administration, from regional planning all the way down to tax collection. Now, because this administrative machinery wields such incredible power over citizens' daily lives, it simply cannot afford to be an exclusive club. The Constitution actively ensures that historical and social inequalities don't block recruitment into the civil service. Through specific provisions and quotas for Dalits, Adivasis, other backward classes, and economically weaker sections, the overarching goal is to build a truly representative bureaucracy. Because think about it, an administration can only be effective and empathetic if it actually reflects and fundamentally understands the deeply diverse public it's meant to serve. But despite being designed and trained to serve the public, there's a massive real-world tension here. Citizens often fear these very officers. And this creates a really profound civic dilemma. People know that civil servants are supposed to be just that, servants of the public good. But the reality on the ground, often wrapped in red tape and authoritarian power, can feel a lot like dealing with absolute masters. When the very people meant to facilitate your rights become intimidating gatekeepers, well, it shifts the democratic dynamic entirely. And this creates just an incredibly difficult balancing act for any government. On the one side, we absolutely have to rigorously shield civil servants from political interference. Otherwise, the bureaucracy just becomes a weapon for ruling politicians to reward friends and punish enemies. But on the other side, we need robust, unyielding citizen accountability. Without powerful tools like the Right to Information Act to force transparency, an independent bureaucracy can quickly become arrogant, unresponsive, and completely detached from the people's needs. So finding that middle ground between political independence and citizen accountability, that is the ultimate challenge. I am going to leave you with a provocative thought to really challenge how you view our government structure. Think about everything we've unpacked today regarding power and accountability. Does true democracy mean that elected representatives should have absolute, unchecked control over the administration? Or, paradoxically, does a fair and functioning government actually require a fiercely independent bureaucratic machine, one that is genuinely empowered to push back and say no to politicians when necessary? Reflect on that as you consider who truly holds the power in our society. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.